All right, man, peace. So, brothers, I finally got the opportunity to properly review the first episode of the LeBron James show, The Shop, on HBO. My original observation on this show upon first watching it was that, yes, it's entertaining. It gives some quote-unquote insight into what goes on in so-called black barbershops. But for the most part, it plays the part of corporate brand building for Mr. LeBron James, who's going into the next phase of trying to project himself as some form of super athlete martyr for the people. It's part of a very cunningly crafted marketing program being propagated by LeBron James and Nike Incorporated, because they both stand to reap many of the benefits and the revenue from projecting him as some sort of social reformer or super progressive who's also a super athlete. Pay attention to what he has on in this episode, the all black, and of course he has on the Nike cap. LeBron James is a Luciferian, okay? A lot of you brothers are going to have a very hard time wrapping your brains around that, but that is what he is. And he's always going to make sure that he stands with Nike. Nike is pretty much in charge of everything that has to do with projecting LeBron James's image and what they and he want you to think and feel about him. They're behind the whole thing, and I've been telling you brothers that for the longest time, and thankfully the information is finally starting to come out.
To be great, you have to give up a lot of shit. You have to sacrifice shit. Time with family. Privacy.
That's the biggest one.
Time with your kids. Certain foods, things. But from the female perspective, a female athlete, are there certain things that you had to sacrifice that you look back and go, I wish I didn't have to sacrifice those things?
Now, brothers, I hope that you pay very close attention to that question, because that question established why Candace Parker was placed on the panel in the first place. She's been strategically placed there to affirm what I've been telling you brothers for the longest time when it comes to quote-unquote black liberalism. Behind the black liberals, despite their pro-black bluster, is always the liberal Caucasian, specifically the liberal Caucasian Jew. And going hand in hand with the so-called black liberation mentality that gets propagated to the masses or put forth to the masses, they want to align that with the so-called feminist movement. And then they combine those two things together in the form of the black feminist movement, which is really just the promotion of the so-called black matriarchy, which is what has been destroying the so-called black community for the last 45 years or so, or one of the main things that has been destroying the so-called black community. The main thing that has been destroying the so-called black community is the so-called black man allowing this bullshit to happen. That's the main thing.
I think it really started when I became a mom. My image of my mom, she was there every day. She dropped me off, she cooked dinner, she did all these things. So my image of what a mother was supposed to be and act was a lot different than what I'm able to give my daughter.
So in other words, you're not a mom. Brothers, aren't all men, but specifically the so-called black man, but aren't all men pretty much inundated in this society with this notion that just being able to inseminate a woman does not make you a dad? That there's a lot that goes into being a father? So she said when she quote-unquote became a mom, but then thereafter she said she can't do all the things for her daughter that her mother did for her. So in other words, you're not a mom. All you were was a sperm receptacle that gestated that fetus, that gestated that that inseminated egg. That's all you are, because by your own testimony, you chose not to take on the mantle of what your mother established for you. So we have to start scrutinizing a lot of these liberal females far sharper. We have to do that for the benefit of ourselves and our own children, because they're trying to redefine what their role is, and they're failing miserably.
Like, I'm not able to be there every second and fix every meal and help her with every homework. And for me, I was hard.
No, it's not that you're not able to be there, it's that you're not willing to be there. Someone who's not able to be there is a female who may be in the position where, unfortunately, she decided to have a sexual liaison with someone, or who, God forbid, may have been raped and decided to bring the child to term or what have you. And now that person is not around and she's struggling with the bills or struggling financially. This person here, Candace Parker, for those of you who don't know, her child's father was a former professional basketball player by the name of Sheldon Williams, who himself signed a multi-million-dollar contract. She could have chosen to give up her career to raise her daughter. She chose not to do that. Instead, she chose to maintain her quote-unquote professional basketball career. And of course, eventually her and the child's father got divorced, which is pretty much the program in this society. I'm sure that they probably were arguing over who was a better basketball player, because we know that most of the liberal females are raised and trained to be competition to the man as opposed to complement. Point being is this notion that she's trying to put forth that that she's not able to do for her daughter like her mother did for her. Really, all she's saying in a roundabout way is that she does not care about her daughter as much as her mother cared about her.
It was hard for me because I struggled, to balance the working mom, because you have these expectations that you're supposed to be at home for your kid and take care and drop them off. But then I'm trying to work and make a better life for her as well.
No, actually, you're not trying to work to make a better life for her. You chose your career over maintaining your nuclear family. That's what you did. But you have to try to cast yourself as a hero on television. And that's how many of these liberal females assist themselves in being able to sleep well at night. Because at the end of the day, they're going to choose their own self-glorification over the maintenance of order, structure, and the nuclear family. So I would like to hear what Sheldon Williams' version or what his perspective of the story actually is. Because I guarantee you that this female here, Candace Parker, gave him hell. Because I remember when they got married. I remember when they had the child. For those of you brothers who remember, he was on the 2010 Celtics when they played against the Lakers in the finals. So he was an NBA player. They were not struggling for money. She just chose her career over the nuclear family because she understood that she could choose her career and take the child and just put him on child support. And I would bet that that is exactly what happened.
Her as well. You talk about sacrifices. When I got pregnant with my daughter, people shouldn't be looking at me crazy.
You gave up a year.
People were not looking at you crazy because you got pregnant. They were looking at you crazy because you are crazy, most likely.
I gave a year of my career.
For us.
You gave up a year of your career, and you want exactly what for that, a cookie? Maybe you should have waited until you retired from basketball to have a child, so that you would not have to make that decision, that alleged difficult decision between having a family and having a career. We know that you certainly value your career over your husband because you sent him off to the wilderness. Once again, brothers, take your time in getting to know these liberal women. Okay, so now we jumped ahead a little bit, and LeBron James is going to bring forth a very true, a very potent, and a very powerful message that's very relevant. And I want you to just listen to how Candace Parker followed up his statement with more of her feminist mind control programming.
I hear my daughter sometimes say, I can't. Yes, you can. You absolutely can. I don't want to hear that you can't stuff. Try it, fail, and then try that shit again. And continue to do it over and over. Don't ever say you can't do something.
Yes.
I agree, sir.
Yes.
Because then you shelter your mind to where something can happen at 3 years old. If you say you can't do something, then it carry all the way to 25 years old.
To hear you
I agree, sir. Totally on point.
hear you say that to your daughter, there's so many people that say that to their sons, and they don't say that to their daughters. They do.
Now, this is normal liberal black female mind control programming. LeBron James made an accurate statement. You should always believe that you can do something. Always. Because if you don't, you certainly can't. If you believe that you can do something, you might be able to do it or you might not. But either way, the mental outlook is going to determine the level of focus and determination that you have to eventually conquer whatever stumbling block that is. Now, of course, Candace Parker transitioned that over into, oh, well, we're teaching our sons this, but we're not teaching our daughters. See, the liberal black female, she looks at black males as her enemy. Why is that? Because due to the feminism that they were taught, they constantly believe that they're being stopped from being everything that they can be because they can't do what the boys do, or they've been told that they should not do what the boys do. The reason why people were raised with gender-specific roles is so that your community could be as fruitful as it is meant to be, so that there's not competition where there shouldn't be, so that they can be a complement, so that things can roll harmoniously as opposed to the chaos that we see. And this is, once again, this is due to a lot of the feminist teachings that so many of these females have been imbued with. And I'm sure that there are people out there that are saying, what's the big deal if a girl wants to play basketball? Well, you'd have to ask yourself, and I promise you, the so-called black woman will be the first person to say this. If so-called black men were all going out and saying, you know what, we're going to take over the hairdressing industry, We're going to take over the braiding industry because if women can do it, we should be able to do it too. You know what black women would say? They would say, what is wrong with these niggas? Why are they so concerned with trying to be us? Why can't they just let us do this? Because this is what women like to do. But when the woman decides that she wants to try to infringe into the sports world or into other arenas that normally have been utilized by men so that they can perform their role as a provider or what have you, supposedly the implication is that men are oppressing women. So it's just something to think about. Once again, I promise you that if the so-called black man was trying to invade a field of endeavor that for the most part had been dominated by so-called black women, they would be met with ridicule, and probably justifiably so. But on the flip side, the liberal black woman expects everyone to believe that if she's not allowed to play out her penis envy fantasies and run out on a basketball court and bump chests with other females who are equally as mentally disturbed as her, that there's something wrong with how children are being raised. The fact of the matter is that almost uniformly, so-called black girls are encouraged and pushed to achieve success in this society far more than so-called black boys are. Beyond that, they're glorified on television far more than little black boys are. That's why you have TV shows like Black Girls Rock and things of that nature, because they're constantly trying to put an impetus behind the so-called black woman to encourage the maintenance and the amplification of the black matriarchal paradigm. That's all it's about. They have to make sure that the so-called black woman stays in control of the so-called black community, because that's how you maintain chaos. And this person here, Candace Parker, is obviously mentally disturbed, like most liberal black women are.
They do it for them. And I was brought up in a household where I had the same curfew as my brothers. I was told I can do the same thing. I didn't have rules that were different. And I think that means a lot to me, because I'm bringing up my daughter that way.
Yes, you're bringing up your daughter that way, but what happened to the man? What happened to the man? Once again, brothers, don't fall prey to or don't fall down that rabbit hole of associating all of these movements together with your own spiritual liberation, because they're not here to assist you at all. I promise you that. Okay, so now we're going to jump forward to a little statement that LeBron James is going to make that oftentimes is put forth by many so-called pro-blacks in an attempt to try to prove to the other races that they should be treated with more quote-unquote respect. Why is that? Because the so-called black man does not understand. Unfortunately, most so-called black men, let me specify, don't understand that the only respect that's valid for us is self-respect and respecting one another. Not worrying about what the other races think or feel about us. But let's listen to what LeBron James has to say here, because this is something that's put forth oftentimes by our people. Really, to me, in the wrong context, because it's relevant what he's going to say, but he's going to say it for the wrong purpose, in my view. So let's see what he says here.
We move everything. We move the way people dress. We move the way people think. We move the way people dance, music people listen to. We move the way people play sports.
And the way they talk.
Now, LeBron James stated something that many so-called pro-black state, that our people are extremely influential. But everything that he stated was in regards to pop culture. See, our people have become the minstrels of the planet Earth. And we want to be rewarded for that. We want the other races to look at us in a form of serious veneration for being able to create dances and singing styles and being great on the basketball court or in the boxing ring or on the football field. But that's not what's going to get you a serious level of respect. Yes, they're in awe of our spirit and our ability to be creative. But that's not an image that's ever going to be treated with any form of solemnity. They're going to look at you like how they would a great clown. You make them smile. They like to have you around. Yes, they might want to copy what we do, because what we do is fun and we have an energy and a spirit behind it that no other race can replicate. But that's not what we should be focusing on. Once again, that's not what we should be focusing on. What we should be focusing on is taking one another seriously. The only way that the other races are going to take you seriously, if that's truly what you're so concerned about, is if we take ourselves seriously, man. It's very, very, very important. That's why I state and I always try to hone in on the fact that the main thing that brothers need to be concentrating on is making sure that they're the heads of their household, whether they're living by themselves or they have a family. A lot of brothers are not the heads of their own household, but they want the other races to look at them as leadership material. And that's not going to happen. That's not how it works. It's not going to matter how well you dance or how high you jump and all that other shit, how well you rap. A lot of our people are very confused about that.
I told when I first went to London for the first time, me and Dre hit the stage. It was like 75,000 motherfuckers in the audience, and they just was rocking, right? I kept going back overseas, and every country I went to, my shit was getting bigger and bigger. And then the cold part was, the way you say I raised y'all, raised a lot of people overseas and taught them how to speak fucking English through my music.
That's a damn shame. Let me say this. LeBron James stated that he was raised by Snoop Dogg. What does that really say? I'm going to say it again, brothers. If you were raised by a rapper or a hip-hop star over the radio or through a CD or an MP3, then you were not raised at all. LeBron James was not raised at all. That's why I state he cannot be a leader because he's confused. I'm not trying to insult the brother or anything like that. I'm just speaking real. We have to restore that connection between the father and the son, because we have a lot of dudes who are being puppeted and being put on television. They're being framed as leaders and they have no leadership abilities. Once again, it is no disrespect. LeBron James cannot even lead his basketball team. How the hell is he going to lead a race of people? It makes no sense whatsoever.
Because we globally affect the whole world. Black people are more respected outside of America than they are in America.
Let me say this. Whether that's true or not is up for debate, but what I will say is that a celebrity who happens to be so-called black is not in the position to assess how well so-called black people are going to be treated anywhere. Because Snoop Dogg has not been treated like a regular so-called black man for 25 years. So who is he to assess how well so-called blacks get treated? We see over in Europe what happens at many of these soccer stadiums when they're throwing bananas out onto the field. We see what has happened with many of the African immigrants in Russia and many other parts of Europe, so on and so forth. We see how the Australian Aborigine was treated in New Zealand and in Australia. So I'm not quite sure if you can make that appraisal. You have to walk as a regular person in various parts of the world to be able to deduce how well you're being treated here as opposed to there. At the end of the day, our people are supposed to establish our own forms of treatment with one another and not be as concerned about the other races as we always seem to be. That's why I say these so-called pro-blacks, they're actually pro-white. They're so worried about how the white man thinks of them.
That's a good point.
That's interesting. That's a fact. Right.
It's more so of black people not knowing who they are.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to rewind this back because Draymond Green is the only person in this entire cipher that actually spoke like a man. And look at the looks on the faces of these three dudes right here. These are three Luciferian globalist Negroes trying to frame themselves as being pro-black, and they're all confused, all three of them. And they were confounded by Draymond's statement. Let me rewind it back.
The reason we...
America.
That's a good point.
That's interesting. That's a fact. Right.
It's more so of black people not knowing who they are. The reason we struggle as black people is because we don't know who we are.
Say that.
And so, I mean, if you want to be quite frank about it, white people know who we are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So Draymond probably knows a little something. I'm not going to put any thoughts on him in regards to what he has an understanding of. But just by his statement right there, he was letting it be known that the main problem that our people have is within us. We don't acknowledge who we are because it's only when you know who you are, then you know what you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. We keep looking for identity from the Caucasian. We keep looking for them to give us a hug. That's why I state these pro-blacks, they just want a hug from the white man. That's all they want. They keep trying to fool people, but you can't fool me. So does Draymond Green know that he's of the people of the book? Who knows? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But based on his statement, he seems to know that to some degree.
That's why they keep fucking kicking us.
Why don't we get out with each other when we're in the same lane?
100%.
It makes more sense.
It makes much more sense, and you actually can become in control of our thing because we really created it. The reason...
That's the point. The point is for you to be in control of what you create. That's why I state that so many of you brothers, you work on these jobs and you're miserable every day. The reason why you're miserable every day is because you're better than the job that you're at. The so-called black man is better than working in corporate America. You should be trying to pursue your own endeavor, whatever it is, whatever gift you have. That's your purpose for being here on the earth. Not to work for another man. Whatever gift you happen to have, whether it's writing, singing, dancing, building, designing, you should take that gift and maximize it so that you can see the fruits of your labor. A lot of you brothers are working 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and you have to punch out, punch in. And what that does is that marginalizes your understanding of what you're capable of, what you can be, what your potential is. And that starts to trickle over into other aspects of your life. You start to tolerate being marginalized by people in your personal life because you get marginalized in your professional life because you're marginalizing yourself, man. But let me rewind back Draymond Green's statement one more time.
That's a good point.
That's interesting. That's a fact. Right.
It's more so of black people not knowing who they are. The reason we struggle as black people is because we don't know who we are.
Say that.
And so, I mean, if you want to be quite frank about it, white people know who we are. That's why they keep fucking kicking us.
Why don't we get out?
Good for you, sir. I have to admit that my respect for you went up about tenfold. Good job.
The reason other cultures are so strong, like a Jew is going to look out for a Jew. A Chinese man is going to look out for a Chinese man.
Now, of course, Jon Stewart is going to object to what Draymond Green is saying because he understands that his people are at the top of the pyramid. So, of course, there's division amongst them, but they're always going to choose one another over everyone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes in based on the notion, the perception that the media is controlled by the super liberal Caucasian Jew, and they try to foment all type of separation amongst the races that are underneath them, because the fact of the matter is that, yes, the so-called Jews, they do control the entertainment industry, the media, as well as the banking system. So, of course, they're going to work together. That makes sense that they work together. The problem with our people, so-called black people, number one, we believe that our race is actually a color, which is not, and that causes all type of confusion that our people have a hard time getting over. As long as you call yourself so-called black or whatever you want to call yourself, you're never going to be able to embrace a culture, because culture is based off of tribal lineage and understanding. That's why the Caucasian Jew rules over the other Caucasians, because the Caucasian Jew, they have a very strong culture. You look at the strongest races in the world, they're all the races with the strongest cultures. The Caucasian Jew, the Asians, the East Indians, the Arabs, they have the strongest cultures because they don't view themselves as a so-called skin color. They're bonded together by an actual lineage. And that's what our people have to come to embrace.
No matter what.
Draymond doubled down on it. He said, Jews look out for Jews, period. Now here come Michael Bennett, the super liberal pansy and the pawn of the Black Lesbians Matter movement. As you can see on his t-shirt, he has the image of Angela Davis, who was a Marxist herself. I've been telling you brothers for the longest time, these guys are Marxists, man.
But you know why? No, it's because they realize that they've been through something they never want it to happen again.
Right.
Humankind is tribal in nature.
100%.
We are born to join and be with groups where we find identity. It's why team fanship is so strong. You know, if we didn't have religion, we'd find other ways to go to war with each other.
Now, Jon Stewart is here acting as the proverbial overseer over this this congregation. And this comes from events that transpired in the aftermath of many of the slave revolts of the early 1800s, particularly the Nat Turner slave revolt. Now, unbeknownst to Maverick Carter and LeBron James and many of the other super liberal, quote-unquote, woke Negroes that are here at this meeting, Jon Stewart is standing in as a representation of the overseer from slavery times. And that convention was instituted mostly in the aftermath of many of the slave revolts in the early 1800s, particularly the infamous Nat Turner slave revolt, where thereafter, any time that so-called blacks met up in a group, there had to be a Caucasian man there to watch over them to make sure that they were not planning anything. That's why I state that without a doubt in my mind. This show is the brainchild of LeBron James's Marxist handlers. That's why they placed the super liberal Caucasian Jewish man there to act as the MC despite them understanding this. I mean, maybe only Draymond understands this. Jon Stewart is there to act as the controller. He's there to make sure that the conversation stays in bounds. You can speak that woke shit, but you cannot speak anything of realism. That's why you see that the main reason why Jon Stewart interjected himself into the conversation was because he saw that Draymond Green was taking the conversation into a realistic place. Draymond started to talk about reality. He was no longer talking about idealism, like Candace Parker or Snoop Dogg or LeBron James. So Draymond Green is someone to watch. We'll see what happens with him.
Because we are tribal in nature and we fight over resources. And when you start to believe that your resources are finite, you begin to treat others as foes and rivals and enemies.
Right.
What would unite us as people if fucking aliens came? And then we'd all be like, humans are in trouble. We gotta jump on this shit.
So in other words, what Jon Stewart pretty much just laid out is the understanding that the multitude of races on the planet Earth are not going to come together until the return that's prophesied in the scriptures, because that's pretty much what Jon Stewart just laid out.
I was raised off, Snoop and Pac and Jay and Biggie, and now I get an opportunity to.
In other words, your father figures were all Luciferian degenerates. That's what you're saying, LeBron James.
To be the inspiration around what all these kids are looking up to, and for me to just sit back and not say shit when a lot of my peers didn't say shit, It didn't feel right.
No, brother, it's not that it didn't feel right. It was that Nike coaxed you to say some things because that was part of your brand. The Jordan brand was that Michael Jordan was welcomed in everyone's household. The LeBron James brand in the woke era is that we're going to be counterculture. We're going to push the envelope. We're going to push certain buttons. And don't worry about it, LeBron. We have your back. That was the marketing plan. And that's all this is a marketing plan.
Athletes don't have a responsibility to speak up for nothing. You have a responsibility to speak up for what you believe in.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Draymond Green. Let me rewind this back for a lot of the woke Negroes who might not understand that.
And for me to just sit back and not say shit when a lot of my peers didn't say shit, It didn't feel right.
That was LeBron James's way of sending a little subliminal shot at Michael Jordan. Once again to say, this is why you should consider me the greatest basketball player of all time. Because I can run my mouth about topics I have no understanding of, and Michael Jordan didn't do that.
Right.
Athletes don't have a responsibility to speak up for nothing. You have a responsibility to speak up for what you believe in.
Thank you, sir.
Just because you're an athlete and you have a certain platform, that does not mean you have a responsibility to speak up for anything. But I feel like at some point in time, it's like you have to be able to stand up on your morals simply because you are representing people who look like you and they looking up to you for a certain. But what if that ain't?
No, sir. Actually, you don't represent people who look like you because you're not qualified to represent me. And that's the problem, and that's exactly what Draymond Green was getting at. You're not qualified to speak up for so-called black issues just because you happen to be a professional athlete who's so-called black. And that's what people like you don't get. You actually have to be qualified to speak up on an issue, and you're not.
That ain't your moral, though. What if I don't believe the same thing? You don't have to believe in me, but
Thank you, sir. Draymond Green is taking over this entire cipher because he's the only one who's actually thinking like a man. I have to give him credit, despite the fact I call him a mama's boy, which is what he is. Oftentimes he's out of control when it comes to his emotions. But it's very, very clear that he sees the world with a higher level of clarity than these other people here.
But we both believe that black kids shouldn't be shot. We both believe that black people should have shit like free water. I'm just saying that.
Here goes Michael Bennett getting emotional. We both believe when you decide to partake in a lifestyle of criminality, it's going to bring bad things your way. So the real issue is that we have to reform a lot of these so-called black men who have embraced the mindset of criminality and assist them in becoming better people so that they can benefit our society, our community. That's what it's about. Because one of the main reasons why we have so many problems in the so-called black community is because of this victimization mentality that gets promoted and pushed by Marxists like Michael Bennett, pea-brain pawns like him who have no understanding of what he's talking about. We have to start holding the so-called black man and young black man in particular to a higher standard of conduct and assist him in understanding how important his own life is as a person and who he is as a person. As opposed to telling him, no matter what you do, you don't deserve to get shot. No, it doesn't work like that, man. It doesn't work like that. Your conduct oftentimes is going to predict what happens to you in your life. Black boys shouldn't be shot. That's like saying Puerto Ricans don't deserve to get arrested. Well, if you commit a crime, then yes, you do deserve to be arrested. It depends on the situation. Singularly, one by one, we have to go over each and every situation to determine, was this necessary? And that's what it's about. And if you truly believe that strongly about young black men or black men not being shot, then we should have our own police force, which is what I've been saying for the longest time. But in reality, people like Michael Bennett, they don't want that type of responsibility. They just want to beg the so-called white man to treat us better, because our people look at the so-called white man as a daddy figure.
The real social issues of people of color, every athlete is affected by them, because we're the same people that used to be in those neighborhoods, dribbling, walking up down the street. They used to wear those clothes. So when I was growing up, I was looking for Michael Jordan to say something. He never did.
Let me get this straight. You were looking for Michael Jordan to say something, to just say something, but you were not concerned about what your father thought about those same issues. And Michael Bennett is someone who grew up in a home with a father. So that's how I know he's a big poser. He's somebody who's just talking shit. And let me say this. There's a major problem in the so-called black community. We're constantly looking to so-called black celebrities to quote-unquote say something about what is quote-unquote going on in the black community, when we have the power to change the issues that go on in the so-called black community. Like, I had one of these guys who commented on one of these videos. I think it was one of the boxing videos. And I always get one of these over-righteous guys every once in a while who tells me to not talk about sports. I should be talking about what's going on in the black community. Let me say this real quick. My father showed me how to conduct myself as a man. A lot of you so-called black men need to start showing your sons how to conduct themselves as men, as opposed to running around talking about all the quote-unquote ills. A lot of you guys like talking about the ills more than you do the solutions. And I'm not somebody who plays into the victimization mentality. And if you're one of those guys, my channel's not for you. The scriptures are very, very clear. All you have to do is abide by what is stipulated there. Love the Most High with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Treat others how you want to be treated. It's not that difficult, man. All the stuff about what's going on in the so-called black community, is racism a major problem? Absolutely. But what's even a bigger problem is how the so-called black man views himself.
But now kids can look up and be like, what LeBron saying?
I liken you to Ali. Like, Ali was, at the time, the greatest.
Right.
This is more Caucasian liberal Jew programming that LeBron James is buying into, because this is what he's seeking after. This is all brand building. I made this video well over a year ago that the liberal sports media was trying to align LeBron James with Muhammad Ali.
Right.
But when he spoke out, he went to jail, man. Like,
Absolutely.
Now, brothers, did you see that? This is what you call woke silly shit. That's what woke people do. They talk about topics that they have no knowledge of. Muhammad Ali never went to jail. He never went to prison. He went to court over being a quote-unquote draft dodger. He was found guilty. He appealed. He toured various universities and colleges for over 3 years to speak on issues and topics, to provide some clarity, some transparency to people who might not have understood what his platform was. Never went to jail, never went to prison. So Jon Stewart, the super liberal Caucasian Jew, he stated something that was factually inaccurate, and LeBron James agreed with him right away. Why is that? Because what they both have in common is neither one of them know what the fuck they're talking about. I'm going to rewind it back.
I liken you to Ali. Like, Ali was, at the time, the greatest.
Right.
But when he spoke out, he went to jail, man. Like,
Absolutely.
even his greatness couldn't insulate him from those rules that they had set up. And did you think to yourself, like, as good as I am, it's not going to matter?
Yeah, because it's not.
First off, let me say this, because once again, I cannot stress this enough, the level of corporate brand building that they're trying to do with LeBron James, trying to equate him with Muhammad Ali. The reason why Ali was castigated so much was because he had to go through a certain procedure according to the laws of the land. Nothing that LeBron James has done has been contrary to the laws of the land. And I did a video about this with Stephen A. Smith, where even he finally came to the understanding that none of these athletes are saying anything that would provide any form of reason for people to come against them hard body. They're acting like they're revolutionaries, and they're really not. Now, Muhammad Ali was someone who really stepped out there. He joined a separatist group, and he made statements that during that time were extremely inflammatory. LeBron James has never done that. He does not have the intellect or the courage to do that. He's a globalist. He wants everybody to come together. He wants to maximize his earning potential, and he wants to make sure that he does not alienate the only entity that he truly cares about, that being Nike. That's it. There's not one statement that he's made other than talking about the president, which just about every Caucasian liberal has done, and which is not against the law, that has put him in the firing line.
At the end of the day, when I decided I was going to start speaking up and not giving a fuck about the backlash or if it affects me, my whole mindset was it's not about me. I think Ali already knew. He knew that it wasn't about him. I'm going to get the backlash. I'm going to go to jail.
Yeah.
Well,
Once again, Muhammad Ali never went to jail. He didn't know that he was going to get the backlash, but it's laughable to me how proactively this guy tries to align himself with Muhammad Ali. And I know that a lot of his fans are not going to see it. They're going to try to reject it because the pro-blackity blacks, they love LeBron James because he's just like them. He talks a lot of shit and has no plan.
well, what this is going to do for the next group, what this is going to do for the next athlete, what this is going to do for the next minority who wants to speak up whenever that happens, Ali's...
Once again, brothers, it's great to speak up as long as you know what you're talking about. I'm not against speaking up at all. I do it all the time on this channel. The whole point of my channel is for me to give my perspective, but at least be informed and know what you're talking about. To be quite honest with you, when you're speaking without a knowledge base, you're not helping anyone. As a matter of fact, you're hurting the people who are subject to a lot of your rants and your nonsense.
Ali's whole mindset was like, at some point, somebody is going to take what I did, and I sensed that. I sensed that on...
LeBron James said Ali knew that at some point somebody was going to take what I did. So I guess LeBron James is saying he was that person. Brothers, never at any time are you supposed to be that braggadocious about what you're supposedly doing for your community. It's supposed to be far more organic than that. That's how you know this is all corporate based, man. All this is corporate based. And LeBron James is a great actor.
On,
All right, so now let's pay very close attention to LeBron James's last statement, because this is a sentiment that I always touch on with the woke pro-blacks, the liberal blacks. They love to point on the spot on the wall, but they can't tell you where to buy paint to cover up that spot. So let's listen to what LeBron James has to say here.
no matter how big you can become in America, no matter how much influence you think you got or do have, you're African American. It doesn't matter. You're still black. You're still black in America.
Now, brother, did you hear that? And when people make that statement, they feel like they're providing some type of sobering context for so-called black people, when in reality all they're doing is making sure that they reinforce the cap at the top of the so-called black man's consciousness, so that they can make sure that he knows that he's never going to rise to a certain level. I don't understand why people love to reiterate this notion, you're black in America, and then in their next breath they're talking about how they want to bring people together. Well, if you feel so dire about the situation here in this society, would it not behoove you to take the opposite tact and talk about what our people need to do as opposed to what we need to do in concert with everybody else? If you truly believe that our people have a limit to how much we can succeed here, maybe that means that we need to separate mentally and spiritually from this society and do what the other elite level races do, which is work amongst one another, build up their own, and utilize and interact with other races for business purposes, and to make sure that you're always on the upper hand, or you have the long end of the stick, per se. You can't just say things like, well, we just black in America, and then everybody makes a sad face and puts their head down. You can't take that tact forever, man. Because at the end of the day, if that's your tact, then that means that you don't have a plan or a solution. But anyway, we'll see what episode 2 holds.